I remember the screaming first. Not my own, that came later, but hers. The woman with no face, standing at the front of the bus as the last passenger's skin began to peel away like wet paper. She was singing something, a lullaby I'd heard in dreams that weren't mine, while her smooth, featureless head tilted toward each dying soul with maternal tenderness. By then, I understood. By then, it was far too late for any of us. But that morning, 3 weeks before the incident that would leave 19 bodies on Route 47 and one survivor who shouldn't have been, I was just David Chen, recently dumped chronically insomniac, riding the 11:47 p.m. bus home from another failed attempt at forgetting Sarah's face. The breakup had been brutal in its simplicity. "I don't love you anymore," she'd said, as if love were a light switch she could simply flip off after 3 years. I never really did. The bus was nearly empty that night, just me, an elderly man sleeping near the back, and her. She sat 3 rows ahead, perfectly still, wearing a long black coat that seemed to absorb the flickering fluorescent light. Her hair was dark, shoulder-length, and familiar in a way that made my chest tighten with hope and dread. When she turned slightly, I caught her profile, and my heart stopped. It was Sarah, or someone who looked exactly like Sarah. Same delicate nose, same curve of her cheek, same way of holding her head when she was thinking. I hadn't seen her in 2 months, not since she'd moved out, taking most of my reason for existing with her. My hands shook as I considered walking over, as I imagined what I might say. "I'm sorry. I've changed. Please come back." The bus lurched to a stop at Elm Street. The old man shuffled off, leaving us alone. In the sudden quiet, I could hear her breathing, slow, rhythmic, oddly musical. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked toward her. "Sarah?" I whispered. She turned around then, and I saw what she had instead of a face. Nothing. Smooth skin stretched across bone, no features, no expression, just blank flesh where eyes and nose and mouth should have been. Yet somehow, impossibly, she was still Sarah. I knew her in my bones, in the parts of me that existed before birth and would continue after death. She tilted her head, that gesture I'd loved, that tiny movement that meant she was listening, and though she had no mouth, I heard her voice inside my skull. "You remember me now," she said, and her words tasted like copper and roses. "You're starting to remember." I stumbled backward, my mind fracturing between rational thought and something deeper, older. This wasn't Sarah. Sarah had a face, had left me for someone else, had eyes that went cold when she said goodbye. But this thing wearing her body, sitting in a bus that suddenly felt infinite and wrong, she knew me in ways Sarah never had. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. "I'm the one who's been waiting," she said, standing now, moving toward me with fluid grace. "I'm the one you've been dreaming about. Every night since she left you, you've dreamed of me." She was right. The dreams had started immediately after the breakup, vivid, horrifying visions of a woman in white standing at the foot of my bed, watching me with love so intense it felt like drowning. Sometimes she would speak in languages I didn't recognize, but somehow understood, telling me stories of lives we'd lived together, deaths we'd shared, promises we'd made across centuries. "The dreams aren't dreams," she continued, her faceless head inches from mine now. I could smell her, jasmine and decay, familiar and terrifying. "They're memories. You've loved me before, David. Many times, many lives. And every time you forget me for someone else." The bus lights flickered, and suddenly we weren't on Route 47 anymore. We were in a classroom, empty desks stretching into darkness, and she was standing at the blackboard, writing equations that hurt to look at. No, we were in a hospital corridor that went on forever, and she was in a white coat, checking charts for patients who'd been dead for decades. No, we were in my apartment, and she was Sarah again, crying as she packed her things. "Stop," I gasped, but the visions kept shifting, faster now, more violent. I saw myself in different clothes, different faces, always leaving her, always choosing someone else. I saw her waiting, patient and terrible as I died in other bodies, other times. I saw her finding me again and again, wearing different faces, loving me with the desperate hunger of someone who knew it would always end the same way. "I won't let you leave me this time," she said, and though she had no mouth, I saw her smile in the way darkness curved around her face. "I've learned how to make you stay." Chapter 3. The Other Passengers. The bus filled suddenly, impossibly, with people who hadn't been there moments before. They sat in perfect rows, hands folded in their laps, staring straight ahead with eyes that reflected nothing. I recognized some of them: the barista from the coffee shop where Sarah and I used to meet, the professor from my college philosophy class, the neighbor who'd complained about our fights through the thin apartment walls. All people I'd forgotten, people who'd been part of my life with Sarah. "They remember you too," she said, gliding between the seats like smoke. "All the lives you've touched, all the people you've hurt by loving the wrong person. They've been waiting with me." The passengers turned toward me in unison, and I saw that none of them had faces either. Just smooth expanses of skin, blank and terrible, and somehow accusatory. The barista stood and began walking toward me, her movements jerky and wrong. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "You used to bring her here every morning," she said. "You'd hold hands across the table and whisper secrets. Then you stopped coming. She came alone for weeks waiting for you, but you were already dreaming of someone else." The professor rose next, his scholarly posture intact despite his missing features. "You wrote about her in every essay. Love is philosophy, you called it. But philosophy is just another word for lies you tell yourself to justify cruelty." One by one they stood, these faceless witnesses to my failures, and began moving toward me. I backed away, but the bus stretched impossibly long now, and there was nowhere to go. She, my Sarah, my curse, my love across lifetimes, watched from the front seat as her congregation of the forgotten closed in. "Every time you love someone who isn't me," she explained, her voice gentle as a lullaby, "you create more of them. People who remember what you had, what you threw away. They become part of me, part of this moment when you finally understand." The faceless crowd reached me, their hands cold and grasping. They touched my face, my arms, my chest, and where they touched, I felt my own features beginning to smooth away. My nose flattened against my skull. My mouth sealed shut. My eyes sank into nothing. "Now you'll remember," she whispered as I fell to my knees, my face becoming blank as theirs. "Now you'll never forget me again." But as my features disappeared, as I became another faceless passenger on her eternal bus, I felt something else changing. The love I'd carried for Sarah, the obsession that had survived death and rebirth, and the passage of countless years, began to transform into something darker, something hungry, something that understood what she'd done, what she'd been doing, what she would continue to do. I was becoming like her. When the police found the bus 3 days later, they counted 19 bodies, all with their faces perfectly smooth, all seated in orderly rows with their hands folded peacefully in their laps. The official report called it a chemical leak, some kind of acid that had dissolved their features but left the rest of their bodies untouched. The only survivor, they said, was the driver, David Chen, found unconscious but unharmed at the wheel. I remember waking up in the hospital, doctors shining lights in my eyes, asking me what I remembered about that night. I told them the truth, that I couldn't recall anything after boarding the bus. They called it trauma-induced amnesia and released me after 48 hours of observation. They had no way of knowing that David Chen had died on that bus, along with the others, that what walked out of the hospital was something else entirely. She's still with me, of course. I carry her now the way she once carried me, in the spaces between sleep and waking, in the moments when love turns to obsession and obsession turns to hunger. Sometimes I catch glimpses of her in mirrors, her faceless head tilted in that familiar gesture of listening. She's proud of what I've become. I understand now what she tried to tell me about love, about the weight of being forgotten. Every person who ever loved someone and lost them, every heart that ever broke, every soul that ever cried out in the darkness, they all become passengers eventually. They all find their way to the bus. I've learned to drive the route she showed me, the one that runs between memory and forgetting, between love and its absence. I've learned to recognize the ones who are ready, the ones whose hearts have been broken so completely that they'll do anything to feel whole again. They board my bus willingly, eagerly, hoping for reunion with the ones who left them behind. Tonight, I'm parked outside a coffee shop downtown, watching a young woman sit alone at a corner table, checking her phone every few minutes, waiting for someone who isn't coming. I can see the exact moment her hope dies, can feel the familiar hunger stirring in my chest. She gathers her things slowly, wipes her eyes with the back of her hand, and walks toward the bus stop. When she boards, she'll see him in the seat where I once saw Sarah, the man who broke her heart, wearing his face but carrying something older, hungrier underneath. She'll walk toward him, desperate and hopeful, and he'll turn around with smooth skin where his features should be. By morning, there will be 20 new passengers on Route 47, all with their hands folded peacefully in their laps, all dreaming of love that consumes and transforms and never, ever lets go. The bus is coming around the corner now, and she's stepping up to the curb. I can see her face in the headlights, young, heartbroken, ready to believe in second chances. She has such a pretty face. She won't have it much longer.